Today, we bring again one of the many untold stories, ever refreshing, riveting, exciting, informative, and stimulating stories on our world channel. The slave breeder man Pata Seca.
Pata Seca.
Pata Seca.
Pata Seca, a breeding slave.
Pata Seca were separated from the labor force.
A breeding slave who had more than 200 children.
We delve deep into the annals of the past, and we look at what shaped our present-day society. Please subscribe, like, and comment for more. Pata Seca was one kind of a black species, whose countenance was a force to reckon with. He stood 7 to 8 feet tall, weighed over 400 pounds. And his physicality was a phenotypical trait. Every man, tribe, race, people, gender, or nation would have loved to inherit. The reason slave masters and women always found him irresistible. Could he have been the great grand ancestor and progenitor of all tall, strong African Americans as propounded by many school of thoughts, or it is a mere conspiracy theory with no existential genetic evidence? Great NBA players like Shaq O'Neal, who stands at 7 feet and was described as the most dominant basketball player of all times, or Victor Wembanyama with a staggering height of 7 feet 4 inches. Zion Williams, a basketball juggernaut, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a scoring freak with such athleticism unparalleled, and the great Nigerian Hakeem Olajuwon, and the many likes of Usain Bolt, Serena Williams, LeBron James, the great Michael Jordan, better still the toughest Navy SEAL, David Goggins, as well the strongest man, Iron Bibi from Burkina Faso, could have inherited his genes. The Americas ranging from North America, the Caribbeans, and South America have largely dominated games like soccer, basketball, and the Olympics so well. Yet the million-dollar question still remains: could Pata Seca had been the genetic code to their stamina, skill, strength, and endurance? A question that many wonders and await to be answered. This giant black slave of a human specimen also reminded us of the ancient tribe of the Anaks, which produced characters like the famous Goliath of Gath, who was a mixture of fallen beings and humans and stood as a monstrous animal among many other things. Pata Seca was a kind of breed many found charming, enticing, a mystery, a special breed of the black African race even as a slave. He was strong, tall, and a hard-working enslaved man who lived up to 130 years. Pata Seca, as he was popularly called, became a remarkable, indispensable figure in the history of slave trade in Brazil. He was born in the 19th century, living through World War I and II fairs, and was dubbed the breeding slave. Due to his indescribable physicality and genetic trait of stamina and endurance, he has become a subject of study to great minds and school of thoughts about if he could have been the secret genetic code to the athleticism and strength of many black Africans in the Americas, and their dominance in many sports, notwithstanding the contributing factor of discipline needed to succeed in everything. His unique ability to labor tirelessly for hours and produce much on plantation farms, coupled with his giant physique, led to this misinformed belief that his physical attributes can be nurtured and replicated to produce offspring of his kind, to meet the workforce for plantation owners and slave masters. Due to the absence of modern-day assisted reproductive technology like in vitro fertilization, intrafallopian transfer, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, and frozen embryo transfer, Pata Seca was forced to have countless sex with multiple women to breed his kind. His exile to Brazil. Roque José Florencio was born in early 1800 but popularly known as Pata Seca, was enslaved and sent to Brazil at a very young age. The great Pata Seca was known to have been traded even as a young boy because of his physicality at such a tender age in those robust Atlantic voyages. A landowner by name Joaquim José de Oliveira was known to have bought and owned him as his slave, laboring on his plantation field. With his great endurance and strength, he was forced to have sex with enslaved women and fathered almost 300 children, a record that was not too common for a slave. With over 300 children, he became an ancestor to about 30% of the total population of Santos Eudoxia, São Carlos, Brazil. This has so much accounted for the diversity in the Americas we see today. Afro-Brazilians are predominantly of sub-Saharan African ancestry, resulting in 54% of their entire population being multiracial. Afro-Brazilians are called Prado, and are among the 5 ethnic categorization of the racial group used by the Brazilian Institute of Geography. Branco is a term for whites, indigena for the Native Americas, amarelo for those who are yellow, and of ethnic East Asia and Prado for the Afro-Brazilians with African heritage. Demographically, about 20 million of a 215 million population are Africans, mapping to 10% of their entire population. The world's soccer players like Ronaldinho, the great world Pelé, Marcelo of Real Madrid, Ramirez Nascimento of Chelsea, Rubinho and Vinicius Jr. of Real Madrid are among black world soccer players that have made Brazil the world #1 country, with 5 FIFA World Cups championships, and they all happen to have African descent. His descendants, till today, have been searching for their kins, both far and near. Pata Seca witnessed the abolition of slave trade in Brazil in 1888, granting him freedom. His extraordinary life became one of honor, legacy, and history, a blend of both resilience and legacy, and later became a testament of endurance against oppressive forces, and has so remained a beacon of hope and inspiration to the world. How it all started. Transatlantic slave trade, which saw the transportation of enslaved Africans sold by their chiefs to European traders, was the dominant human trade in the 16th to the 19th centuries. The Portuguese in the 16th centuries were the primary transporter of African slaves across the Atlantic, mostly to the Americas to work on cocoa, coffee, sugar, tobacco, cotton plantation, gold, silver mines, construction industry, timber cutting, and as domestic servants, and were classified as indentured servants. The major trading nations in order of volume were Portugal, Britain, Spain, France, and the Netherlands. It is known that most of these slaves were purchased from their local African leaders, which happened to be kings and chiefs, while a great amount of the slaves were from the Western and Central African nations. Slaves that were to be shipped were usually imprisoned in factories, and others kept in dungeons and forts while awaiting shipment. The Elmina Castle, from where they shipped, is still present in Ghana, and was recently visited by the great American icon Steve Harvey. Triangular trade was the export of goods from Europe to Africa, where many African kings and merchants partook in the exchange of enslaved Africans. They received guns, ammunitions, gunpowder, alcohol, indigo, dyed textiles, and other factory ready-made products, which they could not produce in the continent. The main cause of the Atlantic slave trade is also attributed to, among many others, the shortage of labor in Europe, and their desire to explore new territories. In the mid-16th century, new Spanish law banned the enslavement of indigenous people, resulting in a decline of labor workforce necessary to maintain the crop production and economic buoyancy of the European markets. Indentured servitude, where people were enslaved to labor for a debt they owed or agreed to a compensation in exchange for a good or commodity, voluntarily also failed to provide the sufficient labor force needed to meet the high economic demands in Europe, forcing them to explore Africa. Their explorations lead them into the interior of the African coast. Due to fear of diseases like cholera, malaria, they typically resided in castles, fortresses, and on the coast, where they awaited captured slaves from the mainlands in exchange for goods, which created a commerce popularly known as the barter trade system. The Atlantic slave trade peaked and became successful as a result of civil wars in Africa. The Congo Civil War, which was a war of succession between the rivals of the House of Kinizala and the House of Kimpanzu, saw many conquests turned in slaves. The rise of the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is present-day Benin, also led many enslaved warriors as slaves. The Niger rivers, which were Igbos, inhabited regions, also engaged in many states. Wars during the 18th century, which provided many wounded and captured war victims of the kings and chiefs as trade goods for these European settlers. The rise of the Ghana Empire, the formation of Gold Coast, as well as the rise of the Ashanti Empire, which is present-day Ghana, fighting its way through the western corridors of the African continent, till their final settlement and demarcation into tribes and countries, as Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, Burkina, and Togo also precipitated slave trade. No wonder Africa as continent has over 3,000 tribes and 2,000 dialects. This trade, which spanned for 400 years, saw the great and mighty Pata Seca was shipped as a young boy to Brazil. Interestingly, we have seen many like Oprah Winfrey declaring her lineage as South African, and even building a school for girls there. Meghan Markle, who was recently in Nigeria together with Prince Harry for the Invictus Games to champion mental health for young people, says she is a descent of Nigeria. Steve Harvey visited the Elmina dungeon where slaves were transported from Ghana to the Americas. Spike Lee spent time with Kamala Harris, U.S. Vice President, while enjoying his African roots in Ghana. Steve Wonder just celebrated his 74th birthday in Ghana, enjoying his African descent. John Legend also traces his roots to the Fonte people of Ghana. Meek Mill was recently in Ghana, as well as Idris Elba, who declared he is from the gay people of Ghana, are among many others. Many great celebrity Americans who trace their roots to Africa also include Whoopi Goldberg, Will Smith, Tyler Perry, the great singer Akon, Samuel L. Jackson, and Michael Jordan, who is reportedly known to be a descent from the war-ridden country of Sierra Leone, or Senegal, based off his looks is still yet to proven. In all, we celebrate the great Pata Seca, whose strength, endurance, genetic phenotype, and physicality has produced great Africans around the Americas and the world. Roque Jose Florencio, the great Pata Seca, eventually married Palmyra, and together had 9 children. He is said to have accidentally stepped on a nail, contracting tetanus, and despite received care from a local herbalist, he died and was celebrated as the oldest man at the age of 130 years. Till today, he is celebrated for his bravery, sweat, effort, and fight against slavery, and still is a historical literature of human specimen boggling the minds of many great historians.